Hi. So we are on part 7 of this series, and today we'll cover yet another pattern that's emanated from, well, part of it is the old school NLP, which looks at the anchors, but we're also looking at embedding other processes into it. So among the earlier talks in the series, there will be a partial reference today to the idea of neurological levels, which we had covered earlier in this series. So neurological level was about when we're talking about bringing about any change within ourselves in terms of a habit, a pattern, success area, and so on. There are several areas of support that we need to look at in our lives, including our physical body in terms of our health, our emotional self, our family, our relationships, our environment, and so on. So the neurological level talks of how do we integrate all of those into the changes that we are trying to bring about. So we will come back to that referencing today. The core of today's discussion is this idea that when we talk of using NLP, when we talk of modeling behavior of any kind, it in a way opposes a very core design assumption that's usually made, which says that form follows function. So in the context of design, when we say, for example, if we have to make a building, the form of the building, the structure of it follows the function of it, which means we need to define the function of the building first, right? So for example, if we know that this building has to be a hospital, then the structure of the building, the form of it, will be designed in a manner that it can accommodate a hospital, right? Which means things can be moved around in a certain way, certain kind of machinery needs to be accommodated, patients who cannot walk should be able to be carried easily. So the form of the building, the structure of it follows the function. The function is defined first, which means we first know that this building is going to be a hospital, and then we design for the function, right? The form follows the function. In NLP, and if we hark back to the origins of NLP when Richard Bandler and John Grinder first started their research, their primary purpose of looking at NLP was to model excellence, right? So modeling is at the very core of NLP theory, and that's where it started off, and that's what it continues to be, that we're looking at modeling a certain kind of behavior, a certain kind of being that will bring in so-called success in a certain area. Right? So when we use this caveat in the context of NLP, we believe that function follows the form, right? Which means the form is already established. We know where we want to get to, what needs to be made is clear, and then we adapt the functions, the current realities in our lives in a manner that it starts fitting into the form which is already envisioned, right? So the form is usually in the future, right? We're trying to shift something into the future. So there is, let's say, something in my current life which is not working for me, and I'm trying to make that change in a way that habit, that pattern, that state of being does not continue into the future. So what I want to be in the future is defined. The form is defined. The current function is not working, and therefore the endeavor is to change my function as I go along so that it fits the form that I desire. Right? So that's very critical to remember, in the sense that we are not working to actively change the function. We are working to actively stay hold of the form, in the sense we know very clearly where we want to go, and then the function adapts. The adaptation of the function is the effort of the unconscious. We're not working through the conscious. Right? NLP largely works in the realm of the unconscious mind, which is the part of our mind that we are not so aware of and yet is still very active. So the pattern that we are going to look at is, there are many names to it. One name for it is called the path to success pattern. The intention of the pattern is to be able to first, of course, envision a form, what we want to get to, and then work back to look at how do we adapt functions unconsciously in a way that the form gets established. Right. So this is the core of what we're talking about today, the path to success pattern. So first step is we connect with the form. What do I want? What do I want to be? What kind of a state of being do I want? So let's say I want success in a certain area of life in a particular manner in the future. Right? So for example, let's say I want to publish a book. Okay, I want to write a book. So the form that I'm looking for is a published book. Right? That's the end goal. And now the effort is to look at how do I adapt all the functions in my life in a manner that it adapts to work towards that form of a book that is already published. Okay? Now, working with the way we work with time in NLP is that it is a mental construct, right? Which means the future is also now. So we look at time as a fluidic concept there. So if we were to go with the example of a published book, the first step that we would look at is define the form. In this case, it's a published book. Connect with the metaphors of the project. Now, metaphors could mean anything that the book represents to me. Right? The visual of a book itself with a certain title and with my name on the front page could be a metaphor. I could also have other associated metaphors for the same form. It could be a metaphor of me maybe signing a book for someone. It could be a certain amount of royalties coming into the bank because of the book. It could be, let's say, me being in a certain place for a book tour. Any metaphors that I can very naturally derive, which for me represents the form. Okay? So each individual would have his or her own metaphor. Okay? The point is here not to look at the process. We are not trying to figure out how to get that book published, but we're just staying with the form, with the end goal to say, here is what I want. I want a book published in, let's say, 6 months or 3 months or whatever is believable for me. Right? So that's the first step where I connect and say, here's the form. Here is a certain metaphor. When we are doing this process, it helps to use spatial anchor and kinesthetic anchor. So it helps if you have space where you can actually walk back and forth and while you're doing the process. So once I'm in a certain state and I've connected and said, okay, the metaphor that I have is this book that is published, I can visualize the book cover. The next step that I look at is to acknowledge what is the support that's available at various neurological levels, the second talk that we spoke about. I'll hark back to that quickly. So when we say neurological levels, we're talking about acknowledging what's already available to me as support in order to fulfill that form of a published book. What are the different things that are available to me currently? What's, for example, in my environment, what's the support system that's available? And the support system could be as simple as saying, okay, I've got a functioning laptop where I can type my book. I have internet access if I need to research. I have maybe the time and space to be able to sit quietly and write the book. All of that is a function of the environment. Right? So what we are trying to do as we step into this process is we're trying to, at the conscious level, check off whatever is available as support. Right? We're putting the mind in a state of ease to say that form is possible because these things are available. So environmentally, I may have certain things available. I could have certain things available in terms of my own capability, my own capacity. Right? So I may perhaps have the subject matter knowledge that's needed to write that book. I may have the life experience to be able to write the book. I may have language abilities to be able to do it. So checking off what capability is available. Also looking at what kind of strategies are available and accessible. Do I have, for example, the ability to mark off a certain amount of time every day or every week that can be totally dedicated to writing or editing the book. So looking at what is strategically available. Also looking at, are there values and beliefs that support me in exploring this form? Maybe I want to write that book because I associate a certain belief or a certain value with it. Maybe I believe that publishing that book could be of help to other people. It could probably be an expression of my identity, my work, right? What is the value that is wanting me to actually go ahead and write that book? And finally, what are aspects of my identity, which is at the very core of my neurology? What are aspects of my identity that are available in support of this project? It could be a professional identity which says that, okay, I'm already an expert in this area and therefore there is a credibility that I attach to myself. It could be external validation of an identity. Maybe I have a certain qualification or something that makes me eligible to write this book. It could be any other aspect of my identity which says that yes, I am indeed qualified to do this project, do this work, and therefore I will go ahead and do what needs to be done. So neurological support can be acknowledged in each of these areas. What we're doing in this process is, as we go from outside to inside, from environment to self to identity, we are in a way going deeper into our consciousness. We are going slightly from the unconscious towards the unconscious, and in the process the conscious mind is getting convinced that okay, there is support available here, there is support available here, these are resources that are available. At the core of NLP is this idea of resourcefulness, right? Going from an unresourceful state to a resourceful state. So what we are doing in this process very consciously is saying that yeah, these are resources that are available. I am resourceful in these areas as I embark on this journey towards the form. So here when I use the term project, I mean in this example I'm using a book. It could be project of any kind. It could be, let's say, changing my body to develop a certain area of physical strength, or climbing the Everest, or getting a certain job, or the project could be anything really. So first step, as we said, connect with the metaphor of the project, what it looks like to me. Second step, acknowledge all the support that's available neurologically, outside to inside, environment to identity. And then start pacing into the future, right? How do we pace into the future? We look at multiple tools. One is a visual anchor, which means we can visualize what success looks like, right? What completion looks like. So I may step up and visualize a scene where the book is getting launched, someone's inaugurating it, someone's opening up the book cover, right? I could visualize maybe me giving that book to somebody that I want to first give the book to. Right? It could be any form of completion that I am able to envision. So one is certainly to use a visual anchor. Visual anchors are usually powerful for most people. It also helps to deepen the anchor a little bit and look at, can I include an audio or auditory anchor? Can I hear, let's say, people clapping in the launch ceremony? Or can I hear myself talking to somebody about what it's like to finally have it published? Can I probably also look at some kind of a kinesthetic anchor in terms of how would I physically feel if I'm standing up there and talking about a book that is already launched? So look at inducing multiple modalities. The more modalities, the more number of anchors we can use, which means the more sensory organs one can use to actually believe that the project is complete, the more real it is for the body. So what we're trying to do in this process as we step into the future and visualize is making the completion of that project an embodied experience. We are bringing that reality into the body where I can see it, I can hear it, I can physically feel it, I can feel the emotion of it. So making it very embodied, making it very real. So we are anchoring the anchoring the visualization into the body. And once that anchor is very firm, it depending on what we are working for, sometimes it helps to spend a good few minutes just doing this visualization step, depending on how big the project is or how big my mind thinks the project is. It helps to really stand there, sometimes 10-15 minutes, just visualize, let the body completely soak in what completion of that work looks like. And once that is complete, once the somatic experience of it is complete, then we look at engaging with the unconscious, and then we step forward and look at saying, okay, so if this is what the future was like, right, this is what it looks like to have launched a book, what did I do on the day just before the launch? What was it like to be just before the launch? So we've made our body believe that I'm already there, I'm in the future, work is complete. And now I'm stepping back to say, okay, remember what happened when I got there. Remember how I got there. What was it like the day before the launch? Did I do something to, let's say, organize the event? Did I coordinate to call up somebody? Or what were the different things that I did in order to make sure that the launch happens perfectly? And again, spend some time. Now here we are engaging with the unconscious. By the time, if you've done the visualization process really well, the body is convinced, you've already started accessing the unconscious to integrate that reality into your present, right? So it's no longer the future, you've stepped into the future and integrated it. So now we're looking back to see how did that happen. And just stand there in that position of the previous day and look at saying, okay, what did I do on the previous day? What are the visuals that come to me? Okay. We're not trying to imagine it. Okay, that's a very critical thing here. We're not trying to engage the conscious mind. So we're not saying imagine what it's like on the day before the book launch. We're simply stepping in and saying, here is a spatial anchor, here is the day before the book launch. Let the unconscious bring up whatever message it needs to bring up to let me know what happened on the day before the book launch. Right? So here is where we are using a mix of anchors, plus we are using time dilation to be able to reach into the future and look at what did I do. And sometimes in this process there are visual clues that come in, which means you may see flashes of things that you do. You may sometimes hear words coming in. The unconscious will throw in all kinds of messages. Sometimes you feel a certain thing in the body, sometimes it's a gut feel of knowing a certain thing, a strategy or a conversation or whatever you need to know. And so this step is crucial. This is at the heart of this pattern. Okay? But it's very important that once you've totally integrated the future into the body, you're only asking for what happened. We are not saying imagine. We're actually saying what happened. It's almost like we're talking about the past, talking about the future like it was the past. So the question is in the past tense, what happened on the day before the launch? Right? And let the unconscious answer it. And then you step back a little more and say, okay, what happened, let's say the week before, or the week before that, and so on. So you keep stepping back little by little, till the time you very slowly come back to the present where you connected with the metaphor, and then you stand at the present and integrate all of those messages from the unconscious, saying here was the process that I followed for that book launch to have happened. Right? So it's a slow process. I've described it very fast, but when you do it, it's a very slow process. It helps to have a lot of peace and quiet and a good half an hour, 1 hour when you're doing this for yourself. You can do it for others also. Personally, I find it easy to do this by oneself. You don't necessarily need to be there for another person to do it, so long as the process is clear. Yeah. Crucial parts that we need to look at are spend a lot of time visualizing, which means in the future position, very clearly integrate the experience into the body, and maintain the past tense when you're stepping back. So you're asking questions in the past tense, saying what happened on this day. If you have a particular date in mind, it helps to ask through that also. So let's say I'm envisioning a book launch on the 30th of December. I would step back onto 29th of December and say what happened on the 29th of December 2018. Okay? So even though the date is in the future, I'm asking the question in the past. So that the mind integrates the future into the body. So it's a mix of multiple modalities of NLP. It's a very rich process if done well, because it uses multiple things. It uses anchors, it uses time distortion and dilation, it uses metaphors, it uses visualization, a whole lot of it. And of course, it ultimately, for me, the gift of this process is it anchors it in the body. It's a very physical, somatic experience. It's not a mental process. You're only dealing with the unconscious and you're dealing with the body. And it helps sometimes to do this process multiple times, particularly if you're feeling, it's very natural that the first couple of times when you're having paced into the future, when you're stepping back to previous day, previous week, you might get into the imagination mode instead of receiving it from the unconscious. It's very natural for that to happen. So if you've identified that that's happening, it's okay to keep going back and forth, keep going back to the future, then keep stepping back till the time you're sure that it's coming from the unconscious. It's not something that your conscious mind is trying hard to imagine. Yeah. And keep integrating that, and once you've integrated that in the first position, then you can complete the process in whatever manner you believe is completion for you. So when we talk of what does the unconscious reveal, stay open to guidance. Sometimes the unconscious reveals in very weird ways. Sometimes a lot of those inputs that come when you're doing the process do not even make sense. You may hear a weird sentence, sometimes you may find a funny sensation in the body. All of that is okay. It is the unconscious talking. We may not be entirely able to decode it. So sometimes just come back, integrate, and then once you've stepped out of the process, just write down what were the kind of messages received. And during the course of the next few days, it will start revealing itself. Right? So it's okay if the messages don't consciously make sense. Sometimes you'll get weird images, or you will see people and you don't know what to do about it. It's okay, just let it be. It's the unconscious transmitting something to the conscious, and then when it's the right time to activate it, the conscious mind will activate the sense of what it means. So just trust the process and flow with it. I remember once when I had done this process, I had one of the statements that had come up from the unconscious when I was stepping back was something like, the square is a circle, and I couldn't make sense of what that meant. But that metaphor unraveled over, I think, the next 6 months or so. I mean, it was well after 6-7 months that I figured out what that square is a circle meant. So it reveals itself in its own ways. Yeah, just stay with the process and let the messages come. Helps to note it down somewhere so that it clicks at some point in time. Yeah. So that's what I had to share today. Neurological levels we've discussed. Just to wrap up, a couple of things that we need to notice: when you're standing, always stand looking at the future position. So if this is my starting point, when I'm stepping up, and this is the future position, when I'm stepping back, I'm not turning around, I'm simply stepping back, still looking at the future. That's again purely to give a visual anchor to say that I have gone there, right? So I'm not going away from there, I have been there and I can still see it. So always stand looking at the future position. and it helps to have multiple forms for the same function, purely so that we can engage more anchors, more aspects of the unconscious can be engaged. So when I say multiple forms for the same function, it could be, so one form that I visualize could be the book cover and that being the symbol of completion for me. I could have another form that talks of the same function. I could have the visualization of, let's say, a royalty check being deposited into the bank, right? That could be another form in which the same process is getting visualized. I could have another thing where I'm talking about the book at a certain institution or a university or something. The more the number of forms we can use, the more aspects of the unconscious start getting activated and talk to us in multiple ways. It's easier to integrate the future into the present when you do that. So when you're doing the same, you can do the same process using multiple forms for the same goal, is what I mean by that. Okay, so you don't have to have only one visual, use multiple symbols of the same thing. Yeah. So that's that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.